Did you know Nevada is now America's fastest-growing state, with population numbers that defy all expectations? Or that ancient lake shorelines are revealing archaeological secrets lost for millennia? How about the fact that Nevada's desert is now powering a renewable energy boom across the West? We've gathered 9 of the latest facts about Nevada in 2025, covering people, past, and power, that will give you a sharper picture of the Silver State today. These are freshly reported updates you're unlikely to have seen pulled together in one place. Let's start with the change shaping everything else: Nevada's explosive population growth. Nevada's 2025 population boom. Fact 9. Nevada's 2025 population boom. Nevada's growth hasn't slowed. It's holding steady as one of the fastest-growing states in the country. Current projections place the state's population at about 3.33 million residents in 2025. Nearly three-quarters of that total, around 2.36 to 2.4 million people, live in Clark County, which includes Las Vegas and the surrounding valley. Washoe County, home to Reno, has also continued on an upward track at around 500,000 residents. Even though growth is slightly slower than the 1990s boom years, the numbers still mark Nevada as a national outlier in population change. The largest force behind this migration is the movement east from California. Families and professionals priced out of the Bay Area and Southern California found Nevada's costs more manageable and its location convenient. For remote workers who kept Silicon Valley jobs after 2020, placing down roots in Nevada became an obvious choice. The state's attraction wasn't limited to Las Vegas either. Reno drew a steady wave of newcomers through its expanding tech corridor, anchored by data centers, advanced manufacturing facilities, and logistics hubs that compete directly with other Western growth centers. Housing, meanwhile, has tightened under the strain. Average home prices in Nevada climbed to about $443,000 in 2025, a record high. In Las Vegas, demand was so intense that many homes sparked competing offers far above asking price. Reno saw entire ranchlands converted into dense subdivisions just to accommodate the waves of arrivals. Developers couldn't build fast enough to meet demand, leaving longtime residents and service workers struggling with affordability as both rents and purchase prices surged. Infrastructure followed the same trajectory. Clark County School District has added new schools each year, but still relies on portable classrooms as student counts outpaced projections. Hospitals reported record patient loads, not from unusual health crises, but from the overwhelming growth of everyday residents needing care. Even the freeways reached their breaking points. Las Vegas' commute times lengthened, while Reno's highways required rushed expansion projects like the ongoing Spaghetti Bowl redesign. Water became a pressing issue as well. With Lake Mead touching near-record lows, lawmakers in 2025 tightened water restrictions across the state. Grass bans became stricter, irrigation limits turned mandatory, and new neighborhoods were required to build with desert-adapted landscaping and water recycling systems in place. These measures weren't optional. Nevada simply couldn't risk unmanaged population increases without conservation safeguards. Demographics reflect the change in real time. Younger, more educated workers now make up a growing share of Nevada's households. Their presence has balanced out the state's historically higher median age and shifted the workforce toward tech and professional sectors that go far beyond casinos and tourism. This demographic wave has fed directly into Nevada's broader economic diversification, giving the state resilience against downturns in its traditional industries. Politics show the impact too. The influx from California brought in voters whose priorities skewed toward transit systems, renewable energy, and growth management. Nevada has long been treated as a swing state, but the local political map in 2025 looks far different than it did even a decade ago. New neighborhoods in Clark and Washoe counties are redrawing voting blocks, while smaller towns have seen their councils reshaped by rapidly expanding populations. Even outside the major metro centers, spillover growth has rewritten small-town life. Communities like Mesquite, Fernley, and Boulder City absorbed thousands of new residents, acting as release valves for pressure in Las Vegas and Reno. Developers targeted land in Carson Valley and north of Las Vegas near Coyote Springs, planning entire master-planned communities designed from scratch. Places once considered quiet or rural now carry the same growth burdens as the big cities. For economists, the story is transformation on a compressed timeline. Nevada's expansion between 2020 and 2025 took fewer years to achieve than other Sun Belt cities experienced across decades. While earlier forecasts suggested conditions would taper, Nevada continues to attract enough migration to sustain pressure on its labor force, schools, housing stock, and water systems. In effect, the state has become a bellwether for rapid American migration flows in the 21st century. Culturally, these shifts are visible on the ground. Las Vegas neighborhoods show a mix of tech workers, engineers, entrepreneurs, and service employees who previously might never have considered relocating to Nevada. Cafes, coworking spaces, and farmers markets are stepping into spaces once dominated by strip malls. Reno's mix of long-standing traditions with startup culture has created a distinct atmosphere reflected in events, festivals, and even its food scene. Over time, the identity of both cities has broadened to match the diversity of the incoming populations. Federal agencies have already adjusted their planning to account for what's happening in Nevada. The Department of Transportation, for instance, has slated multi-billion-dollar upgrades to highways and airports in anticipation of continued inflows. Similarly, federal housing and energy officials factor Nevada's surge into regional strategies, recognizing the state's importance for both mobility and renewable energy expansion. If anything, this growth in 2025 shows Nevada as both a frontier of opportunity and a case study in stress. It's an opportunity for newcomers to access jobs, affordable living compared to California, and a growing economy. It's also a test for policymakers tasked with balancing limited resources against fast-changing demands. The boom doesn't look like a passing phase. Instead, it has become a structural reality that will shape Nevada's economy, society, and environment for decades. And while these changes dominate Nevada's present, the land itself holds reminders of a much older story still being uncovered. Long before modern neighborhoods and freeways, these valleys were home to shorelines, camps, and civilizations whose traces remain beneath the desert floor. Ancient Lake Lahontan's New Secrets. Fact 8. Ancient Lake Lahontan's New Secrets. While today's basins may look like endless flats of dust and salt, archaeologists in 2025 are peeling back the surface to show they were once busy lakeshores. The greatest of them was Lake Lahontan, a massive inland sea that covered much of western Nevada during the Ice Age. Recent fieldwork has revealed that its receding shorelines sheltered people far earlier and in greater numbers than anyone had believed. Digging into buried terraces and mapping old beach ridges, researchers have rediscovered hearths, stone tools, and petroglyphs dating back about 12,000 years. These finds place Nevada among the earliest continuously settled landscapes in the United States. For decades, the common assumption was that the Pleistocene Great Basin was too harsh for long-term habitation. The new evidence contradicts that idea. Charcoal from ancient hearths shows that families camped along the shrinking lake margins, sometimes returning through multiple seasons. At Grimes Point near Fallen, more than 150 boulders bear carved markings that stretch across millennia, spirals, geometric patterns, and animal figures. Similar discoveries around Pyramid Lake confirm that what appear today as dry hills scattered across sagebrush desert were once islands surrounded by deep water. From those islands, people carved art into the rocks while water lapped below. Standing among the petroglyphs today, you are looking at images created by people who fished, hunted, and thrived in an environment that no longer exists. Archaeologists emphasize that technology is what makes this clearer now. Ground-penetrating radar and improved landscape imaging have allowed field teams to identify hidden occupation terraces sealed beneath sediment. What appeared to be natural ridges or eroded washes reveal themselves as ancient campsites once tested. By placing excavation units in these flagged zones, archaeologists have uncovered flakes from tool making, burned seeds, and preserved fish bones, showing that people were not only hunting land animals, but also building a subsistence strategy that included fishing and gathering lake-edge plants like cattails. Taken together, these fragments point to complex living along Lahontan's shore, with more permanence than short stopovers. One of the most visually striking sights is the wave-carved tufa cave near Winnemucca. Thousands of years ago, this cavern lay at the waterline, its opening touched by waves from the giant lake. People sheltered within, using it as a vantage point to look out across open water. Today, that same cave gazes not on a lake, but on dry salt flats, a sharp reminder of how drastically climates shifted and communities had to adjust. Archaeologists interpret features like this as living classrooms on resilience. As the Great Lake retreated into smaller remnants like Pyramid Lake and Walker Lake, people adapted instead of abandoning the basin. Other sites reinforce those patterns. Lovelock Cave preserved basketry, duck decoys, and food scraps from thousands of years of occupation, showing how desert peoples shifted from lakeside fishing and gathering to inland resource use as water vanished. Spirit Cave added one of archaeology's most surprising discoveries: remains of a man over 10,000 years old, genetically linked to northern Paiute descendants who still live nearby. Far from being isolated finds, each of these discoveries connects to the larger Lahontan story, evidence that Nevada's valleys were not barren refuges, but landscapes of long-term community. The petroglyphs at Grimes Point and Pyramid Lake remain the most vivid markers. To stand before them is to see the record of a vanished shoreline. Researchers highlight one striking detail: petroglyphs etched high on what now looks like a barren desert hill. Their placement makes little sense until you realize those ridges were islands during Lahontan's high stands. The carvings belong to a time when water surrounded those rocks, making them sacred or strategic points for ancient communities. This imagery of island art now stranded in desert dust is one of the clearest windows into how dynamic the Great Basin once was. The story told by these findings is not just local. Archaeologists compare tool styles from Lahontan with those in Oregon and California, finding direct links to wider networks of movement and knowledge sharing. Obsidian fragments traced by chemical analysis point to sources far outside the basin, meaning that early Nevada communities were not isolated bands, but participants in larger regional systems. Nevada's role shifts from marginal desert to corridor, a crossroads of Ice Age migrations where groups paused, exchanged knowledge, and returned over generations. The meaning of these discoveries is twofold. On one level, they literally push back Nevada's human timeline. Radiocarbon dating shows organized activity here stretching to 13,000 years ago, placing it alongside some of the earliest evidence across North America. On another level, they illustrate how people adapted to abrupt ecological change. When Lake Lahontan evaporated into patches of playa and salt flat, communities restructured their diets, moved with seasonal water, and found new ways to persist. That lesson resonates strongly in today's context as modern Nevada grapples with water scarcity under climate stress. Each artifact cluster, whether a ring of stones, charred seeds, bone scraps, or a chipped blade, marks more than survival. It represents decisions, traditions, even symbols imbued with meaning. Small pieces like ochre pigments point toward rituals or body decoration at a time when the lake was fading. Such details broaden the picture of Ice Age inhabitants beyond hunters clustered at campfires. They were communities making sense of their place, enacting symbolic practices, and shaping landscapes as they shifted from water abundance to desert scarcity. The importance also lies in preservation. Much of this record stayed hidden because wave deposits and layers of sediment sealed it away. Only as 21st century technology penetrates those deposits and drought lowers groundwater levels to expose features, do these long-hidden sites come into focus. Archaeologists believe what has been found so far is only a fraction of what the Lahontan Basin holds. Thousands of undiscovered sites may still rest under shallow dust, waiting until the right survey brings them into view. Modern Nevada, often seen as raw desert, gains new perspective through this record. The contrast between past and present is stark, Where ancient families once paddled across wide lakes, we now drive across parched highways. Where they carved on island rocks, we see desert ridges. Each discovery rewrites not just scientific timelines, but cultural imagination of the Great Basin. Instead of peripheral emptiness, Nevada emerges as a center stage for resilience, innovation, and early connection. And while these traces remind us of past resources, Nevada's present is shaped by a new wave of resource demand. The land that once held abundant water now holds minerals with global value. Just as ancient people organized life around Lahontan's shores, today communities organize around another resource, reshaping the state on a massive scale. Lithium mining turns Nevada into a battery capital. Fact 7. Lithium mining turns Nevada into a battery capital. Nevada is no stranger to mineral booms, but the rush defining the state today isn't about gold or silver. The focus in 2025 is lithium, the light metal essential to electric vehicle batteries and large-scale energy storage systems. Dubbed white gold, it comes out of the state's volcanic basins and clay deposits, reshaping entire regions into hubs of the clean energy economy. Nevada now produces more lithium than any other place in the United States, and major commercial projects are operating at scales designed to supply North America's expanding battery supply chains. Leading this transformation is Thacker Pass, a site in Humboldt County that only a few years ago was tangled in lengthy permitting processes, protests, and lawsuits. By 2025, after years of regulatory reviews, the mine has become one of the country's largest lithium operations. Ore from the site is processed into compounds like lithium carbonate and hydroxide, then shipped directly to manufacturers supplying electric vehicle gigafactories and grid-scale battery farms. Thacker Pass is not alone anymore. New projects are advancing across northern Nevada's McDermott caldera, while exploratory drilling and permitting continue in Nye and Esmeralda counties. Together, these initiatives make Nevada central to the national strategy of securing a domestic battery supply chain. Energy planners note that every shipment leaving these mines reduces reliance on imports from South America, Australia, and China. The scale of potential reserves is large enough for Nevada's clay-based deposits to rank among the biggest in the United States. For policymakers, that means more than economic opportunity. It means a measure of energy security. Lithium has become a critical resource for national strategy, and Nevada's mines anchor discussions about how much of the supply chain can be kept within U.S. borders. While other mining industries have waxed and waned in Nevada over the decades, lithium faces a global demand curve that continues to rise due to the integration of electric vehicles, portable electronics, and renewable energy storage. Still, this rapid rise has not come without opposition. The location of Thacker Pass and surrounding deposits sits on landscapes that several indigenous groups identify as culturally and spiritually significant, including sites of historical conflict and sacred ground. State and federal permitting processes had to contend with tribal opposition throughout the early 2020s, and even after operations began, protests and legal challenges continued. For tribal members, the fight is about more than land use. It is about protecting ancestral sites from being consumed by industrial pits. Environmental groups added their voices as well, pointing to the ecological consequences of mass-scale projects in delicate sagebrush ecosystems. Concerns focus especially on heavy water use, which threatens local aquifers, and the disruption of wildlife habitat, including critical ranges for sage grouse. These two issues, water and cultural impacts, remain central to the debate over whether Nevada's lithium should move forward as quickly as it has. For people living near the mines, the impacts are visible every day. On one side, lithium projects have brought jobs to rural counties that long struggled with economic stagnation. Roughly 15,000 Nevadans now work in mining, and average annual wages, about $132,000, rank far above national norms. For workers in Humboldt County, these paychecks represent stability and opportunity not seen in decades. Small towns have seen new housing construction, full restaurants, and school enrollments rising after years of decline. On the other side, ranchers worry about the aquifers that sustain their cattle and crops. The process of extracting lithium from clay deposits consumes water, and in regions where recharge is slow, that demand clashes directly with long-established agricultural use. For some residents, lithium's promise as a clean energy resource feels like a direct threat to their livelihoods. The divide characterizes much of rural Nevada in 2025. Local governments benefit from new tax revenues while managing pressure for upgrades to roads, housing, and medical facilities. Service businesses see new contracts for food, equipment, and transportation, while the rhythm of desert towns speeds up with the arrival of contractors, machinery, and transport trucks. But at the same time, communities hold meetings about shrinking irrigation flows and ask whether their valleys can sustain both ranching and large-scale mineral extraction. Where mining companies see resource-rich landscapes fit for industrial expansion, longtime residents see homes and traditions at risk of being overshadowed by global energy priorities. Policy debates reflect that tension. Some lawmakers push for higher tax rates on lithium production to channel revenues into education, water infrastructure, or transition funds for impacted communities. Industry representatives counter that higher rates could discourage investment before domestic lithium supply chains have a chance to dominate international markets. Regulators face pressure from two sides. On one, national energy planners who want fast, large-scale development in Nevada. On the other, environmental monitors and local groups calling for stricter oversight, water protections, and cultural preservation. Reclamation is legally required, but restoration of large clay pits and disrupted valleys often takes decades. Whether future residents inherit stable, reclaimed land or abandoned pits is an open question that looms over every expansion. Geopolitics is often part of the broader narrative, but more in measured terms than sweeping claims. Nevada's lithium resources don't erase global competition, but they improve the U.S. position within it. Instead of sole reliance on overseas supply, North American manufacturing now has a domestic source of feedstock. That doesn't resolve every vulnerability, but it strengthens energy independence in a sector expected to dominate the next generation of transportation and renewable energy systems. In practical terms, what happens in Nevada's northern valleys directly influences American capacity to meet clean energy goals. For younger Nevadans, lithium mining has also altered career paths. Technical training programs appear in high schools and community colleges, offering students the chance to enter high-wage fields locally instead of leaving for work in larger cities. The industry itself remains male-dominated. Over 80% of direct jobs go to men in 2025, but the labor force includes a growing range of mechanics, engineers, geology techs, truck drivers, and machine operators, diversifying employment options far beyond the service economy. Wages and benefits make the sector attractive, though industry leaders still face shortages of qualified personnel, an issue that regulators mirror in their own agencies. Simply put, both the mines and the regulators tasked with oversight face recruitment challenges to keep pace with expansion. At the state level, the revenue picture is significant. Mining contributed more than $400 million in taxes in recent years, with portions from net proceeds and excise taxes earmarked for education. Lithium's rise is expected to push those numbers higher. For rural counties, those revenues translate into budget surpluses not seen in decades, but also requests to expand spending on roads, utilities, and emergency services to serve newly arrived populations. The question becomes not just how to manage growth, but how to ensure that when the cycle ends, the communities are left with lasting benefits rather than stranded infrastructure. Between optimism and anxiety, a broader picture emerges. Nevada's lithium boom is rebranding the state's identity. Once known for gold, silver, and casinos, it is now part of a larger transformation tied to clean technology. Gilts of jewelry have given way to chemistry compounds powering electric cars. Agricultural valleys host equipment yards as ore trucks roll through. Protest camps line access roads, even as local diners fill with engineers and drivers earning record wages. For better and for worse, lithium has made Nevada one of the most critical pieces of the U.S. energy infrastructure puzzle. And just as lithium has put Nevada at the center of the energy supply chain, another transformation is reshaping the power landscape itself. The very electricity that mines, households, and industries depend on is being generated in a way that would have seemed unlikely only a decade ago. Renewable energy dominance in 2025. Fact 6. Renewable energy dominance in 2025. Nevada has always been defined by its vast landscapes, but in recent years, those same open spaces have turned into the foundation of one of the most ambitious renewable energy builds in the United States. What makes 2025 remarkable is how thoroughly solar power, paired with large-scale battery storage, has become central to the state's electricity system. Instead of relying on traditional fossil fuels driving older economies, Nevada now runs much of its grid on projects specifically designed and approved through NV Energy and the Public Utilities Commission of Nevada. With dozens of operational solar fields, integrated storage banks, and more on the way, the state has quietly positioned itself as a true clean energy leader. The most visible symbol of this push sits northeast of Las Vegas, the Gemini Solar Project. Built on thousands of acres of desert floor, it covers such a wide expanse that anyone flying into Harry Reid International Airport can spot its reflective panels. Gemini didn't remain a one-off experiment. It became the anchor for a string of new projects scattered across southern Nevada. Facilities near Mopa, El Dorado Valley, and Pahrump now add to the state's capacity, each one tied to utility-scale batteries capable of storing massive amounts of power for nightly demand. This pairing of solar fields and storage has made all the difference, addressing the historic challenge that solar energy surges during the day but fades after sunset. Nevada solved that problem by committing early to battery integration rather than treating it as an afterthought. The rise of this infrastructure is easier to appreciate in context. A decade ago, Nevada's renewable portfolio leaned heavily on geothermal projects in central counties, with solar still considered secondary. By the 2010s and 2020s, however, rapid development flipped that balance. Southern valleys, once left largely untouched, are now productive energy zones feeding electricity across the state. The result by 2025 is a system where renewables carry a significant share of statewide demand and sometimes even generate more electricity than Nevada consumes, allowing exports onto regional grids in California, Arizona, and Utah. What experts once treated as a peripheral player has become a keystone in the West's clean power strategy. Scale is what strikes visitors most. Standing near the perimeter of a site like Gemini, the rows of panels stretch toward the horizon, creating metallic plains in what once seemed endless desert. These installations feed into new transmission corridors, routing electricity into Las Vegas, north toward Reno, and westward across state lines. With so much available land still open, developers and regulators continue to permit additional arrays, ensuring even more capacity in the years ahead. What first looked like a bold gamble on solar has become routine infrastructure, cementing Nevada's role in supplying not only its own residents, but the wider region. Economic effects help explain the momentum. The build-out attracted billions in investment and created steady work in installation, maintenance, and technical support. For a state that once leaned heavily on tourism as its economic driver, renewable energy introduced new opportunities. Las Vegas diversified with firms managing solar operations and research bases, while Reno saw parallel growth in grid optimization and storage advances tied to its technology sector. Local governments welcomed the new tax revenue, often spending it on schools, road improvements, and water infrastructure. The economic base is still expanding, with new projects bringing consistent skilled labor demand even as construction concludes. Storage remains the technological centerpiece. Large utility-scale lithium-ion batteries installed alongside solar fields capture excess generation during sunlit hours and discharge it once demand spikes at night. That stability has changed how residents and businesses experience summer evenings. Air conditioners run through record-breaking heat waves without sudden blackouts. Casinos operate with secure baseload power, and manufacturing plants maintain schedules without interruption. This shift also allowed natural gas plants to shift into backup mode rather than serving as the primary line of defense for grid stability. Engineers point to Nevada as proof that pairing renewables with storage can achieve not only sustainability goals, but also reliability improvements. Policy choices factored into this success. Nevada lawmakers had adopted ambitious renewable portfolio standards, aiming for a majority share of clean energy across the next 2 decades. Instead, much of that progress happened faster. Regulators approved major projects at a steady pace, and utility managers coordinated grid improvements to handle new capacity. Interstate transmission continues to pose challenges, but Nevada's role as a net exporter of renewable energy has already begun. Southern California utilities purchase Nevada-generated energy, turning desert sunlight into profitable revenue streams. In this way, Nevada has shifted from being a resource-poor state when it came to fossil fuels into one of the most strategically important renewable suppliers in the entire country. Balancing land use and conservation remains a focus. Covering large tracts of desert with panels stirred controversy about habitat disruption, groundwater use, and visual impact. Yet developers adapted. Many arrays were built to allow partial growth of native plants under panels or to maintain corridors where wildlife can pass through. Elevated tilting designs minimized disruption to soil crusts and plant life compared to early models. While debate continues, Nevada has kept expansion moving forward with incremental engineering and planning changes designed to reduce long-term ecological costs. Residential integration deepened the cultural presence of renewables here. Incentive programs encouraged homeowners to invest in rooftop panels, cutting utility costs while feeding back into local grids. Public facilities followed, adopting solar where it provided budget relief. For many Nevadans, renewable energy is no longer an abstract environmental cause, but a practical part of daily life seen in bills, jobs, and city planning decisions. Younger generations grow up assuming the desert's horizon will include not just mountains and sagebrush, but long lines of dark blue solar modules silently feeding power into the grid. Looking at the timeline, the transition is striking. Within a single generation, Nevada moved from modest geothermal output and reliance on imported fossil fuels to a state defined by solar exports and advanced energy storage. Development happened quickly, not through scattered additions, but through bold, large-scale projects designed for rapid deployment. For national planners, the lesson is that aggressive action in the right locations can yield measurable results far faster than incremental steps. Where California wrestled with legacy infrastructure, Nevada started with open valleys and built modern systems from the ground up. And the push is far from complete. Additional proposals for new utility-scale solar fields are already under review. PUCN documents show ongoing applications that could push Nevada's renewable share even higher in the next few years. Transmission line upgrades are planned to carry future surpluses west. Energy analysts suggest that if trends continue, Nevada could soon become the first state where renewables dominate not only domestic use, but also long-term contracts for interstate supply. For Nevada residents, this transformation has turned the desert's harshest trait, the relentless sun, into its most valuable resource. From economics to grid planning, the shift altered how communities think about long-term resilience. Instead of reliance on finite mineral booms or cycles in tourism, Nevada secured a new identity built on energy reliability and export potential. That new identity is visible on the landscape, but the state's most unusual stories aren't always found on its surface. Beneath those same mountain ranges and desert valleys lies another record-setting feature, hidden not in panels or wires, but underground. Nevada breaks 35,000 known caves. Fact 5. Nevada breaks 30,000 known caves. By 2025, Nevada officially documented about 30,000 caves across the state, making it one of the most cave-rich regions in the United States. This immense count reflects years of effort by geologists, speleologists, and survey teams cataloging and scanning underground spaces hidden beneath the state's deserts and mountain ranges. Using modern tools like LiDAR, ground-penetrating radar, and drones, researchers have identified caves that were previously overlooked, from narrow fissures barely wide enough to crawl through to echoing underground halls stretching hundreds of feet. The tally itself stands as a reminder: Nevada is not just dry land above, but a multi-layered world below that continues to grow as new openings are mapped. What makes this number remarkable is not just its size, but the sheer diversity of the caves themselves. Unlike other states with a concentration of caverns in one region, Nevada's caves appear scattered across almost every county. In the north, limestone ridges contain karst caves carved when groundwater dissolved stone during wetter climates thousands of years ago. In the south, the story is different. Volcanic caves shaped as lava tubes formed during ancient eruptions. Together, these caves illustrate Nevada's unique geologic variety. In some places, chambers resemble natural cathedrals filled with stalactites and dripstone columns. In others, entryways are so narrow that explorers must crawl on hands and knees. The breadth of formations makes Nevada less a seamless desert and more a honeycomb of underground corridors and chambers waiting to be charted. A familiar starting point is Great Basin National Park, home to Nevada's best-known cavern, Lehman Caves. Tourists from across the country visit this limestone showpiece, partly because it is accessible and partly because of its striking features: flowstone draperies, clusters of stalactites, and glistening stalagmites built layer by layer over tens of thousands of years. Yet Lehman is only the most visible representative. Within the boundaries of Great Basin, researchers have documented around 40 separate caves so far, many hidden away from the public to protect delicate mineral formations. Some formations inside, like fragile soda straws, thin, hollow tubes of calcite, are so delicate that even the faintest touch can break them. Others act like natural recorders of ancient climate. By analyzing oxygen isotopes preserved in stalagmites, scientists reconstruct how rainfall and temperature shifted in Nevada since the end of the Ice Age. These mineral deposits record past climates with the same precision tree rings record growth years above ground. The scientific payoff of cave exploration extends beyond climate history. Several surveys in recent years yielded fossils of Ice Age animals preserved deep within limestone pockets and sediment layers. In 2025, paleontologists announced the discovery of ancient ground sloth bones in one of Nevada's remote caves, evidence that even large mammals used caverns for shelter thousands of years ago. Smaller finds include the remains of rodents, birds, and bats, their delicate bones insulated from decay by still air and mineral crusts. Each fossil is a snapshot of an ecosystem long gone, preserved more securely underground than it ever could have been on the state's wind-blown surface. These remains give scientists new data about past habitats, diet patterns, and ultimately how species adapted or disappeared during periods of drought and change. The caves also reveal mineral forms rarely found elsewhere. Beyond the iconic stalactites, explorers encounter gypsum flowers curling from walls, glistening crusts of rare salts, and crystal deposits formed in chemically unusual settings. In the Snake Range, unusual mineral growths have provided geochemists with insights into how aquifers once flowed beneath the mountains. In some cases, the very chemistry of underground water and rock interaction is written into the fragile crystals lining cavern walls. Such formations turn Nevada's underground into a giant natural archive, one where scientists can trace ancient water sources, track evaporative changes, and understand the geologic processes that sculpted the Great Basin. And yet researchers stress the figure of 30,000 caves may not be the final word. Estimates suggest tens of thousands more remain unknown. Nevada's terrain is expansive and rugged, with many mountain ranges still unsurveyed or only partially mapped. Remote sensing continues to reveal subtle depressions and cavities signaling potential cave openings hidden by rock and soil. Many of these remain inaccessible, waiting for field teams with proper equipment to verify their extent. The full size of Nevada's underground network, how many caves it holds, how deep they go, remains an open question that likely won't be fully answered for decades. The work of documenting caves is painstaking and dangerous. Unlike hiking across desert flats, Cave surveying often requires rappelling into vertical shafts, crawling through jagged rock, and working in environments with unstable ceilings where collapse is a real concern. Each new cave added to Nevada's databases may represent hundreds of hours of careful exploration, mapping, and cross-checking. Modern technology, like three-dimensional LiDAR scanning, allows explorers to build accurate digital models of caves without needing to enter every passage directly. Drones equipped with cameras can penetrate narrow openings unsafe for human entry. Even so, human surveyors remain essential, and their safety remains a constant concern. Caves also have cultural and archaeological significance. While recent surveys have not confirmed new evidence of ancient habitation in 2025, archaeologists consider many of Nevada's caves potential shelters used by indigenous peoples throughout the Great Basin. In other parts of the region, caves once served as seasonal camp shelters, food storage spaces, or sites for murals and rock engravings. Given the sheer number of caves in Nevada, many experts believe some may still hold cultural artifacts untouched for thousands of years. For this reason, groups like the Nevada National Speleological Society stress the importance of leaving unknown caves undisturbed until they can be properly documented. Preservation today could protect evidence of past human activity tomorrow. Climate research, however, remains the strongest thread tying Nevada's caves to contemporary science. Long after ancient lakes dried and forests shrank, stalagmites silently recorded shifts in rainfall and drought. Sampling calcite layers allows researchers to reconstruct timelines of megadroughts, wet periods, and sudden transitions. In 2025, isotope analysis from several newly mapped caves shed light on when the Great Basin began its modern desert climate. Findings suggested desertification accelerated far earlier than surface records indicated, shifting our understanding of regional climate resilience. These cave-based records now serve as one of the best archives for Western climate history, crucial for understanding both past survival and the challenges of future warming. Not all of Nevada's underground passages look alike. Alongside limestone caverns, volcanic caves add another dimension to the state's subterranean map. Lava tubes formed during ancient eruptions in southern Nevada are sometimes long enough to rival larger cavern systems in their length. Their smooth walls and linear features differ from the dripping, jagged complexity of limestone caves, but they count equally toward the growing network of mapped sites. Together, karst systems and lava tubes demonstrate the range of geologic processes that shaped Nevada over millions of years. Every type of rock, from carbonate layers to basalt fields, contributes to the patchwork of caves. Nevada's standing is significant compared with other regions. While places like Kentucky and New Mexico are known for single famous systems such as Mammoth Cave or Carlsbad Caverns, Nevada stands out for scale and distribution. With about 30,000 documented caves and more still anticipated, its underground world spreads across nearly the entire state in smaller, scattered clusters. Rather than drawing attention to a single tourist destination, Nevada's caves collectively represent one of the densest records of subterranean features in North America. This breadth changes perception. Nevada is not only desert and sagebrush above ground, but also one of the richest labyrinths of stone formations hidden beneath. For researchers, the achievement of cataloging so many caves is both progress and challenge. Detailed digital archives now track cave dimensions, mineralogy, and ecological features, building one of the most extensive subterranean datasets anywhere in the country. Yet explorers repeatedly note that the number is incomplete and temporary, a foundation rather than an endpoint. With drones able to scan narrow openings and AI-assisted imagery able to process aerial surveys, the tally will continue to climb. The true extent of Nevada's cave systems may not become clear for generations. Despite their limited visibility to the public, the caves are already reshaping how Nevada is understood. To scientists, they are living research libraries holding records of rainfall, ecosystems, and geologic history. To cultural historians and archaeologists, they are potential repositories of human stories stretching back tens of thousands of years. To geologists, They are evidence of an extraordinary combination of karst landscapes and volcanic fields, creating an unparalleled subterranean diversity. When viewed together, the caves form part of a larger theme. Nevada as a state defined not only by what is visible on the surface, but also by hidden systems influencing its climate stories, ecosystems, and history. And while these cave count milestones highlight Nevada's subterranean depth, another ongoing story in 2025 has unfolded on its wide desert playas, an event that reshaped the economy, culture, and environmental debates in ways just as dramatic, but above ground. Burning Man's updated 2025 impact. Fact 4. Burning Man's updated 2025 impact. Every summer, tens of thousands travel to Nevada's Black Rock Desert for Burning Man, and in 2025, the event is bigger than just an arts festival. It has become one of Nevada's key seasonal economies, supporting everything from small-town gas stations to large hotel chains. Participants spend heavily before, during, and after the week-long gathering on food, camping supplies, rental trucks, fuel, and accommodations in Reno, Sparks, and Fernley. The total spending reaches into the hundreds of millions and temporarily transforms rural towns that otherwise face economic stagnation. For many businesses, the festival is their single most profitable stretch of the year. That financial footprint changed how state officials view Burning Man. What once seemed like a countercultural experiment tolerated on public land is now treated more like a major convention or sports tournament with measurable statewide impact. Businesses stock inventory to match the surge of visitors, rental agencies expand fleets, and restaurants run extended hours. The flow of money keeps entire communities afloat well beyond Gerlach's gravel streets. For Nevada policymakers, late summer now functions as a predictable economic burst, tied wholly to the festival's presence. Because of this scale, authorities also increase scrutiny. The desert setting is fragile, and the impacts cannot be brushed aside. Officials now treat the festival as a regulated seasonal economy subject to environmental oversight. What was once just an ethos, leave no trace, has become a matter of compliance. In 2025, both organizers and agencies use on-site inspections and remote imagery to verify whether camps properly clean up and dismantle their operations. Camps that fail to restore their areas face fines rather than just community criticism. This step marks a turning point. Environmental responsibility isn't optional anymore, it is enforceable. Organizers themselves responded with systems that reshaped the event. They tightened rules on how camps manage their waste and gray water, required detailed environmental plans before entry, and placed stricter limits on water use. Misting tents and pools that were once common are scarce now, replaced by conservation systems brought in by camps who must justify every gallon. Energy use has shifted too. To cut back on fuel and emissions, new incentives reward participants who adopt renewable power setups. Many neighborhoods are now quieter because solar panels, batteries, and even temporary wind turbines replaced the constant noise of portable generators. These changes not only shrink the festival's footprint, but also transform its atmosphere. Burning Man's culture has always emphasized art and radical creativity, but by 2025, those values operate alongside detailed compliance. Participants may celebrate freedom of expression, yet their camps also file environmental paperwork and enforce internal cleanup rules. For some, this feels like a loss. For others, an evolution, proof that a gathering of 70,000 people can experiment with sustainability at scale. Either way, it has turned the playa into a testing ground for ideas that urban planners and policy leaders observe closely. Off-grid microgrids, renewable-powered communities, and coordinated waste systems designed for short-term populations. Environmental debate, however, remains unresolved. Some ecologists argue the playa's crust and ecosystems cannot truly recover no matter how strict the rules grow. They point to ongoing soil compaction, trace pollutants, and cumulative stress from decades of crowds and vehicles. Others maintain that constant monitoring and tougher regulations now keep actual damage within acceptable limits. The tension lies in balancing an economic lifeline for Nevada's small towns with long-term questions about desert health. The reliance of rural communities underscores the stakes. Local governments depend on lodging taxes, fuel sales, and festival-driven business to cover budgets through the rest of the year. Convenience stores and motels along Highway 447 make enough in a handful of weeks to survive the slow months. Geological itself owes much of its vitality to the annual influx of burners. Few in the region want to see the event curtailed when their own livelihoods depend on its presence. That dependence, though, complicates how openly residents or businesses can press environmental critics' concerns. Within the Burning Man community, the stricter oversight has created internal debate. Traditionalists argue the festival's original identity, radical self-expression, no outside control, feels compromised under regulatory structures. Newer participants often welcome the changes, seeing them as a natural extension of Burning Man's principle of responsibility. The result is a cultural tension that reflects the festival's growth. It is no longer just a spontaneous gathering, but a recognized institution with expectations from governments, businesses, and global observers. Yet its spectacle endures. Enormous art pieces rise on the playa. The central burn remains a defining moment. Music, performances, and creativity continue at a scale few places on Earth match. Only now, that spectacle is surrounded by guardrails designed to ensure the desert recovers afterward. Burning Man still draws the world's attention, but its 2025 impact is measured not only in art and culture, but in budgets, policies, and ecological monitoring. The paradox is straightforward. Burning Man has grown into both an economic engine and an environmental challenge. Hundreds of millions of dollars flow into Nevada's towns, while each year also brings fresh arguments about whether the playa can sustain this repeated stress. In 2025, the festival stands as one of the state's defining cultural events and one of its most regulated temporary cities. Its place in Nevada is secure, but the costs and benefits continue to spark debate across economic, scientific, and cultural lines. And while the spotlight often falls on dust and art in the Black Rock Desert, Nevada's most urgent challenge exists somewhere else entirely, tied not to creativity in the sand, but to a reservoir that millions rely on for survival. Lake Mead's 2025 levels. Fact 3. Lake Mead's 2025 levels. In 2025, Nevada's central challenge is written in one stark measurement: Lake Mead's water line. The largest reservoir in the United States remains close to record lows, hovering at around 30% of its designed storage. That figure is not just a number on a chart. It translates directly to whether drinking water, irrigation supplies, and hydroelectric power remain reliable for tens of millions of people across Nevada, Arizona, California, and beyond. Each update from the reservoir serves as a reminder that Western growth still depends on a water system that is stretched thin. The decline in Lake Mead reflects a long-term shift scientists say is now structural. Warmer winters have reduced the mountain snowpacks that once fed the Colorado River. More precipitation falls as rain rather than snow, and what snow does accumulate melts weeks earlier in the spring. This means less steady runoff during the dry months and far less opportunity for reservoirs like Mead to recharge. Even after years with above-average rainfall, inflows are not enough to rebuild water levels to the historic averages planners once expected. Hydrologists describe this pattern not as temporary drought, but as aridification, a baseline change in how water cycles through the system. Those diminished inflows cut directly into energy production at Hoover Dam, built to harness the power of the Colorado River. The dam for decades symbolized a stable supply of hydroelectric energy. In 2025, with the reservoir sitting near its lower thresholds, power generation has dropped by about a quarter compared to historic levels. Less water means less force driving the turbines, which in turn forces electrical grids to rely more heavily on alternative sources. Often that means purchasing natural gas power, raising both carbon emissions and consumer costs. One reservoir therefore links not only to water security in desert neighborhoods, but also to the reliability and climate impact of electricity grids across the West. Daily life across southern Nevada reflects these realities. Las Vegas and its neighboring communities no longer allow the lush lawns and sprinklers that once lined suburban streets. Turf removal ordinances have spread across entire districts, and decorative water features have been shut down. Golf courses, long considered icons of desert leisure, now operate under strict water budgets, with wide green fairways replaced by capped irrigation and reclaimed water only. Even hotel pools and resort facilities have faced caps on refill volumes. Residents live under strict household quotas, and violations carry fines rather than warnings. For many locals, this transformation is visible block by block. Cactus, stone mulch, and desert shrubs stand where grass once grew. The concern reaches far beyond Nevada's neighborhoods. Lake Mead holds water allocations that serve more than 40 million people across the Southwest. Agricultural production in California's Imperial Valley and Arizona's Farm Belts, among the nation's major suppliers of lettuce, alfalfa, and winter vegetables, relies on deliveries stored in Mead. As the lake dips closer to critical thresholds, federal officials trigger tiered shortage agreements that cut allocations, forcing states and municipalities to reduce what they withdraw below historic claims. These adjustments echo through food prices and urban water planning, renewing long-standing debates over whether agriculture or cities should receive priority. In 2025, the political negotiations around the Colorado River are as much about survival as they are about contracts. The contrast with other reservoirs illustrates Nevada's vulnerability. In the same year, much of California enjoyed refilled lakes after years of storm cycles, with major reservoirs there measuring at or above their seasonal averages. Nevada did not share in that rebound. Mead remained near the 30% mark, with Lake Powell upstream in similarly low condition. This uneven distribution reflects the fact that Nevada, the driest state in the nation, depends disproportionately on shared river systems rather than multiple independent watersheds. When those river systems falter, the state has little backup capacity. Energy planners point out that these shortages ripple beyond household water and agriculture. Each lost unit of hydroelectric power at Hoover has to be replaced with something else. The fallback often remains natural gas, which increases both emissions and vulnerability to market fluctuations. Utilities pass the higher costs onto ratepayers. This creates a paradox where renewable, low-carbon asset, hydropower, becomes unstable exactly when the push for zero-carbon electricity accelerates. The reservoir has therefore become a barometer not only for water, but for energy stability and climate response. For residents, the strain also shows up in quality of life and public health. Urban cooling depends heavily on tree cover, irrigated spaces, and pools. As those resources dwindle, cities grow hotter, especially in relentless summer heat waves. Older residents without efficient cooling face higher medical risks, while hospitals bear the strain of heat-related illnesses. Low-income households, often charged with fines they cannot afford for exceeding quotas, struggle to retrofit their homes with efficient appliances or greywater systems. For a tourism-centered economy, the disappearance of familiar water features, hotel fountains, golf resorts, and lake marinas, reshapes visitor expectations and business models alike. Las Vegas resorts adjust with rock gardens or artificial turf, but the absence of iconic water spectacles changes the look and feel of the desert's entertainment capital. Scientists and planners increasingly note that Lake Mead may not regularly return to the levels seen in the 20th century. While occasional wet winters may bring modest surges, managers now plan around a lower long-term baseline, assuming ranges that remain closer to 30 or 40% capacity rather than expecting full storage. That shift forces reconsideration of everything from municipal growth plans to agricultural allotments. It also reflects how much adaptation has become central policy. Conservation, efficiency improvements, and recycling programs are emphasized not as temporary emergency measures, but as structural necessities for the decades ahead. Wildfire adds another element to the crisis. With fuels drying across northern and eastern Nevada by late summer, fire potential climbs just as water resources become less dependable. Lake Mead's levels influence regional water logistics, meaning shortages extend even into emergency management strategies for firefighting. Fire, drought, and limited supplies now interact together, creating multipliers of risk rather than isolated challenges. Still, Nevada leaders are investing in adaptation. The state's climate initiative sets goals both to reduce emissions and to fortify water systems against disruption. Recycling facilities, stormwater capture, and urban efficiency retrofits feature prominently in statewide planning. The hope is to stabilize supply even as demand grows. Yet despite all these efforts, Lake Mead remains irreplaceable. Its scale and central positioning make it a resource that cannot simply be substituted. As long as it stays below capacity, stress will flow outward into households, farms, energy systems, and state budgets alike. Along its shoreline, the changes are unmistakable. A broad band of white mineral deposits, called the Bathtub Ring, marks where lake water once stood. That pale trace climbs dozens of feet above the current surface, each season etching the record of decline higher. Boat ramps extend hundreds of yards, ending on dry ground. Former marinas shift miles from the waterline or close entirely, unable to adapt as the shoreline retreats. Recreation that once defined the lake now diminishes year by year, replaced instead by stark images of emptiness. Even in years when snow or rain improves Colorado River inflows, the improvements feel temporary. The reality is that demand consistently outpaces recovery, and the lake stabilizes far below the highs of a generation ago. Climate projections suggest future summers will grow hotter still, with evaporation increasing and snowpacks shrinking further. In this sense, the levels recorded in 2025 are not anomalies. They are warnings of what may soon become the settled norm for Nevada and the greater Southwest. So when analysts measure Lake Mead at roughly 30% capacity in 2025, they are not marking just a local water shortage. They are describing a shift in how millions of people must now live, farm, generate power, and govern growth across much of the West. The reservoir serves as a central gauge of whether the region adapts fast enough to balance demand with shrinking supply. For Nevada in particular, it is not only an environmental story, but a daily reality. All around the state, reminders of impermanence continue to shape how communities interpret their place in the landscape. Waterlines carved into canyon rock record one form of decline, but across Nevada another kind of marker. The fading remnants of past settlements sits in silence, carrying its own lessons about adaptation and survival. Ghost Town Preservation in 2025. Fact 2. Ghost Town Preservation in 2025. Across Nevada, a quieter effort unfolds far from the glare of casinos or solar fields. The fight to preserve the state's ghost towns. These abandoned mining camps, once symbols of sudden fortune and just as sudden collapse, are being stabilized and restored instead of left to crumble into dust. By 2025, preservation has shifted from small groups of history enthusiasts into a coordinated system involving the Nevada State Historic Preservation Office, the Bureau of Land Management, and local volunteer groups. Together, they provide funding, technical support, and oversight so that what remains of Nevada's mining heritage can survive another century. In Goldfield, one of Nevada's largest boomtowns of the early 1900s, multiple historic structures have now been stabilized or restored. Rooflines on once collapsing buildings were rebuilt, facades shored up, and wooden sidewalks reinforced so visitors can actually walk the same streets that once connected banks and saloons during the town's peak. Standing on those wooden planks today, you're not just observing static ruins, you're stepping into a town that now anchors heritage tourism in central Nevada. Local officials expect these efforts to bring a stream of visitors, feeding small hotels, cafes, and galleries that might otherwise struggle to survive. A similar story plays out in Tonopah, where downtown blocks risked being lost after decades of neglect. Here, preservation crews combine both craft labor and high-tech tools. Drones and 3D scanning capture collapsing beams and shifting walls down to precise measurements, creating a permanent record that guides stabilization work and preserves details for the future. Instead of relying only on old photographs or sketches, restoration teams can rebuild walls and rooflines to their exact historic dimensions. This digital documentation also allows for virtual models, that schools and museums use, extending the reach of Nevada's ghost towns well beyond those who can travel there in person. Technology is more than a tool of convenience. It has become central to how preservation operates in 2025. Every fragile wall or tilted foundation can be scanned, archived, and replicated before it collapses. In some cases, scanned models are used to fabricate replacement parts that match original structures with near-perfect precision. For communities, this means ghost towns can be restored with a high level of authenticity while remaining safe enough for 21st century visitors. It also means that even if a building is lost to weather or fire, the record needed to rebuild it isn't gone. The economic dimension is equally important. Preservation no longer functions as charity, but as a strategy for sustaining rural towns in a difficult economy. Rural counties now see ghost towns as valuable tourism draws, places that offer authenticity tourists cannot get from resorts or casinos. Towns like Goldfield and Tonopah build guided tour, operate small museums, and sell local crafts tied directly to their mining history. For visitors, the experience goes beyond plaques and photographs. They can stand inside a restored courtroom, peek into miners, tunnels, or explore old storefronts. This sensory engagement is what builds repeat tourism, turning faded corners of Nevada into active contributors to local economies. The discoveries tied to these preservation efforts add another layer. In 2025, stabilization crews uncovered forgotten interiors that had been sealed for generations. In Goldfield, workers came across a hidden saloon buried under a collapsed floor, complete with broken glass bottles, rusted fixtures, and faded wallpaper that had not been exposed since the 1920s. In Tonopah, reopening blocked tunnels revealed abandoned rails and century-old tools left behind when miners walked away. These artifacts are now being catalogued for display in local museums, giving each town something tangible and unique to show visitors. For communities with few economic options, these finds translate directly into tourism dollars and renewed identity. State and federal agencies provide the backbone that makes this work possible. The Nevada State Historic Preservation Office awards grants and provides guidance to meet preservation standards so projects avoid mistakes that could undermine historic integrity. The Bureau of Land Management, which oversees much of the land where these towns sit, coordinates permits, and ensures that restoration teams work within guidelines that protect artifacts still embedded in the sites. This framework means ghost towns are not treated as abandoned curiosities, but as shared heritage with a network of stewardship behind them. Tourism promotion has expanded the impact. Travel Nevada markets these ghost towns as part of statewide heritage trails. Visitors are encouraged to link multiple sites together on road trips, connecting large restored towns like Tonopah with smaller, lesser-known camps scattered across the state. Digital maps and promotional campaigns make it easy for travelers to discover several towns in a single trip, spreading revenue beyond a single stop. For nearby motels, diners, and gas stations, this outreach means visitors who might have once sped down US 95 without stopping now plan entire weekends around exploring Nevada's mining past. For the residents who live in these towns, preservation is not just about visitors, but about survival. Communities battered by job losses and shrinking populations now find new prospects in heritage tourism. Locals take up roles as tour guides, business owners, or caretakers of restored buildings. Schools integrate field trips into their curricula, making history tangible for students who walk through stabilized mine offices or stand beneath timber beams salvaged from collapse. These encounters instill pride in rural youth, reminding them that their hometowns hold cultural importance beyond economic hardships. Preservation, in this sense, functions as both community revitalization and education. Environmental realities make the push urgent. Nevada's harsh climate accelerates the decay of historic structures. Wind and freezing nights break siding, while desert summers splinter timber and erode adobe. Without intervention, entire blocks can collapse within a season. Preservation crews working in 2025 prioritize stabilization to extend the life of structures long enough to integrate them into heritage trails and tourism circuits. It isn't permanent, but each repaired roof or reinforced wall buys decades of protection, enough time for small towns to establish sustainable economic models around tourism. Digital tools extend this preservation into new territory. High-resolution 3D models and drone maps create archives far more comprehensive than any collection of photographs. These models feed directly into virtual experiences, offering online tours that expand access for those around the world. They also ensure that if a collapse does occur, enough detailed data exists to reconstruct what was lost. By 2025, every major restoration project builds both a physical and digital presence, meaning the investment in Nevada's ghost towns has a safeguard against future loss. All of this reframes ghost towns from being symbols of decline into assets for resilience. Through coordinated policy, technology, and tourism planning, Nevada turns its mining ruins into cultural centers that still give back. Ghost towns stand today not as forgotten shells, but as active reminders of adaptation, fueling local pride while supporting small economies. When you walk a preserved sidewalk in Goldfield or step through a stabilized saloon in Tonopah, you see how Nevada's past is being rebuilt into part of its future. These efforts illustrate that preservation is about much more than nostalgia. They represent strategies for survival in places where traditional economies have faded. They connect residents to cultural continuity while bringing in new streams of revenue. And they reveal Nevada's determination to treat its history not as background scenery, but as working infrastructure for the present. As Nevada heads deeper into this period of rapid change, the story told by its ghost towns adds another dimension to its identity. Saving these places reinforces the idea that the state's character comes not only from its natural resources or modern industries, but also from the lives and communities that shaped its landscape before. And in that balance, between growth, history, and survival, lies the larger portrait of Nevada in 2025, a place still rewriting its story. Fact 1. Nevada in 2025 comes into focus as a state defined by contrasts, its cities expanding with new residents, its reservoirs shrinking under climate pressure, and its deserts covered in solar fields and battery projects. Ancient traces like Lake Lahontan's shorelines stand alongside modern lithium mines and renewable grids, showing how past and future collide in the same landscape. The choices made here about growth, water, and energy carry weight well beyond Nevada's borders, shaping how the West adapts to change. Which Nevada fact surprised you most? Tell us below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more.